Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. AI in procurement, real benefits, real lessons. So look, before we get started, I just want to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. You've all got the opportunity to submit text questions by clicking the Q&A button on your control panel at the bottom of the page. Please send in your questions anytime you like during the presentation. We'll collect these and address them when we get to the Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. And please feel free to ask any questions you want. And it's great that we've got so many of you participating and joining us today. So I'm Malcolm Harrison. I'm the host of today's webinar. I'm a senior advisor at Efficio and formerly CPO at Nestlé and CEO of both SIPS and the Crown Commercial Service. And I'm delighted to be joined by José Oliveira. José is a very experienced procurement consultant. He's also an author of books on procurement and is the leader of Efficio's AI practice. And we will also be joined by Ninian Wilson. Ninian is the CEO of the Vodafone Procurement company. Ninian is a well-renowned expert in not only the field of procurement, but in adapting and adopting AI in procurement. And I know Ninian will join us very soon. So let's get started. I've got a few questions. Jose, you're going to get the questions first, and Ninian will join us when he can. So if we think, Jose, about the opportunities for AI and for digitization, and if we think about the technology and the tools which exist or need developing, which, in your opinion, are the ones that work well? And what are your views on, the two-part question is, what are your views on implementing offerings from third parties versus building your own solutions?
Thanks, Malcolm, and it's a pleasure to be here today. So going right to your question, I think what AI is doing that is very important is how is it boosting existing tools and existing solutions versus what is it actually generating by itself. And in the procurement space, we're seeing that it's by itself, it's making a huge change in the way it allows us to process data, the way it allows us to enrich it, to make it more relevant, to make it better quality, and to connect it. It's much faster to read contracts these days. It's much faster to understand what's in invoices. It's much faster to be able to combine it. And it's also much faster to get high quality synthetic market research data. So AI is doing a lot of that by itself. What it can do too, but I think is lagging a little bit behind, is to what extent does it empower existing solutions? And the way to look at it the most visible thing in procurement is the S2P suites, the ERFX, e-sourcing, the P2P processes, etc. And there the answer is, where AI can most help there is actually probably a change at basically redesigning how those processes are done and making it much less flow-based and much more, conversational based for the user. But that requires a lot of work in terms of implementation and in terms of adapting those rules and to your own needs and to your own process before it isn't a bit of a risky proposition. In terms of the second question of make versus buy, if you ask large organizations, how they approach it, I think waiting to buy for them is not an option, right? They understand that there are several use cases that are already there, that they already have an instinct that it's doable, and that they should press the button on it and move with it. I think there are very good reasons to think that it is possible to do with make. And I think it also is important to look at, there is going to be a lot of disruption in the vendor market, and therefore the buy option might be very exciting. You might see a lot of very flashy things, very great demos, etc. But it's still a bit of a question mark in terms of who's going to be around in 12, 18 months. Do the implementations work as well as they look, and how well do they integrate with other aspects? So there's a little bit of a hold and see, maybe wait a little bit for like some leaders to we don't see yet on the buy side a category killer. So that's a bit the the challenge. That's the where the buy thing for sure eventually, but there's a lot you can already do by making.
So are you seeing more people at the moment making before they buy, or are you saying that they're not buying because they're a bit worried that they might buy something and then it's not the right thing or it's not scalable?
I think the two questions around the buy hesitancy, one is the how does this integrate with what I already have? I mean, there are some leading companies that are saying that I will probably have to switch off other things and replace them, and that's perceived as like a big step. So I think there's a little bit of hesitancy about how does it integrate and how does it work. There are things that when they are less integrated into the overall system, into the overall flows, I think people there are faster to buy and to experiment. For example, clients that for some reason replacing their CLM, they will probably then go, okay, I can actually go and look at a native AI solution instead of what I'm doing, or if they want to charge their ordering and all that stuff. So that's how why there's a bit of hesitancy from a market standpoint right now. And I'll stop right there because Ninian also just
Hey,
arrived.
Ninian, great to see you. Thanks very much for joining us today.
My goodness, you wouldn't think I worked for a technology company, would you? That was so difficult getting into this. But clearly
Well,
it
hey, look,
was,
technology companies have been having a tough week this week, Ninian.
they have. And last week for us as well in the UK.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. And just to let me just sort of, José and I just started talking, and let me just introduce you to everybody that's on the call today. So Ninian is the CEO of the Vodafone Procurement Company, a well-respected leader, and I would call a bit of a zealot in the procurement world in AI. Ninian's always been at the front of challenging the barriers of what we can do with digitization and technology. Ninian, it's great to have you join us. Jose and I were just talking about do you develop this yourself or do you buy it from various vendors? And then we're saying, well, there's so many vendors and we're not quite sure which ones are going to succeed. And is it a scalable solution? Well, what's your perspective here?
I think it's a great part of the discussion. Developing yourself, obviously, you're going to have some core capability in order to do that. That kind of goes without saying. But there are a number of companies out there at the moment who'll be willing to offer to do things for free of charge for you, so you can learn without having to buy immediately. And I'd encourage everybody to do a little bit of learning. And if there's some sort of proof of values you can do, or what used to be called proof of concept, then certainly worth actually getting on the bicycle and actually learning to cycle the bicycle a little bit. So maybe speak to some of the companies that are out there and get them in to come and show you what they can do, so you can learn a little bit, and then you can decide whether you do the make or buy decision once you've got a better feel for the technology and how it can transform your function. Yeah.
So you've both actually said this isn't an obvious answer.
No, it's not.
Yeah. And what about this challenge of all these great new solutions out there, and people are saying, well, we're not sure if they're scalable or not. What's your perspective on that?
I think when you look back at the various booms which we've had, and you think back to those of you who are old enough to think back to the dot-com boom in the 2000s, what you got is a proliferation of opportunities and little companies growing. And then rapidly that bubble expanded, and then it condensed down to one, two, or three winners, if you think about what actually happened. So we're probably going to see something similar again. The challenge in all the different point solutions is exactly that. So the question then is how you integrate them into your organization and your business, and whether you buy something as a kind of an integration layer, so then you can plug via APIs into your organization. So the challenge with all these things is integration. And if you're not careful, you end up with lots of discrete point solutions, none of which are integrated. So therefore running end-to-end process becomes more complicated. Yeah.
So integration, a key challenge. Are
Yeah.
there any other sort of key features, and we're talking sort of generally at the moment, are there any other sort of key features which you think are really important when selecting a particular piece of AI?
I think for sure usability and the user interface is really, really important, because you really want people to love what they're using. And the expectations now we've talked about consumerization of IT for 20 years, right? And we've always talked about getting the user interface as as easy as Google search or shopping on Amazon, right? So given I run the shopping department in Vodafone, and we've never really delivered on that experience for our internal staff and colleagues, right? So having a user interface that's intuitive, that's easy to use, I think gets a little bit of a breakthrough moment, as opposed to something that's clunky. If you don't use it every day, you forget, and it's not intuitive. So I think the user interface, as well as the functionality, is important. Yeah.
José, it'd be interesting your views on the user interface, because you
But
have to provide this to a whole group of consultants in
so
Efficio.
it's I mean, we went from like 0 to 1,000 in about 3 months with using different AI tools and creating a bit of an AI center. And the experience we're having is that so besides the user interface, which I think, there's a lot of help now possible through like the agent flows, and it's getting better and better, the user experience that you can do. But besides that, there's also some sell points to the user about, if you don't use it through here, you can't find it. Particularly around the link towards, we can't give you access to data in bulk, but we can give you access to specific data resources. You can't ask for 1,000 subscriptions of like a market report provider, but you can get specific points if you ask the right questions on the back of the database. So from our perspective, there's some arguments to be had about why this is adding a lot of value for you in terms of access to data, in terms of insights that you would not find otherwise, because the insights are not, AI, a lot of this outcome is not just better Google search, right? It also is something that allows you an architecture of looking up first your information, synthesizing it better. The prompts also avoid you from making mistakes, and then also leveraging market data, so that there's some logical arguments to be made to have people use it more intensely, that make a huge difference from like an early adoption and from an excitement standpoint.
Okay, great, thanks. If we sort of talk about AI and AI's applicability within procurement, all of the different processes and activities that a classic procurement function would be responsible for, interested to get your perspectives on perhaps which are the processes or the functionality which is sort of the best fit for digitization, or the most challenging, or the ones where you think you're going to get, or you are seeing you're getting the biggest benefits.
Who do you want to start with that one, Malcolm?
José, you go first.
José, you start.
I can start. I think there's some immediate areas that we're seeing can clearly be a very target-rich, contracting being an example, because there's a lot you can basically read and make sense of and triage and help and prioritize and analyze much faster. I think there's an expectation that processes will become much more fluid, much more conditions-based, etc. But I don't think that's right now, right there. And I think there's definitely things around baselining cost forensics information that is perceived as also high potential, but the problem there is more the habits that people have in consuming that information. So I can give you a lot of information now that I wasn't able to do even like 6 months ago, but you're still not going to consume it the right way. And I think one of the challenges AI is so contracting for sure, market research for sure, the cost forensics probably a lot. Other things go more into the kind of synthetic, document treatment, etc. But that's more like personal stuff. But the challenge is still the adoption and the creation of habits about how you use these things. And the second challenge, more for a procurement leader, is yes, we can focus on what we do right now, and that's going to be accelerated. But also, there should be a lot of focus about what can we do that we were not able to do before. So if you look at how your team should look like in 12 months, they should probably be doing much more research, much more analysis than they do today, which is more related to document production and compilation of things and all of that.
Thanks, Ninian.
I think those are really, really good points. I think the way I look at it, we certainly run processes in procurement, yeah? And where you run processes that are fairly standard, and I think a procurement process is fairly standard. You want to understand what's out there in the market. You want to gather internal requirements. You want to put some sort of commercial documentation together, and you want to run some level of competition. I think there are various points where AI can really, really help reduce the administrative. There's no reason an AI agent can't write the tender. That's simple stuff. It's admin heavy. If you've got a big database of what you've done before, you can do that. So there's no question it can do that. We are also got our autonomous sourcing, giving coaching and feedback to suppliers through the tender process. We used to do this anyway, right? So, you're not very good on health and safety. You're not very good on the technology roadmap. You're not very good on the commercials. And if you can do this, you'll improve. So that dynamic feedback piece, I think you can give. My team tell me it will eventually negotiate. I think they're feeding me something there. I think at the moment. The contracting piece, 100% agree with José. Again, we do 2,500 to 3,000 contracts a year. We've got a database that's 30,000. We know exactly where we give. We know where we don't give. We can give that to something to negotiate. But then again, you might not use this tooling on your real strategic partnerships, right? It might be more of the simple procurement you're doing to start off with. And obviously, the thing that is the key differentiator, as José has said, is that context around your context, your cost base, and how you analyze that and get insights. So I think it can really help the function. We think we'll see about 30% reduction in cycle time for a tender. And you got to remember, on the flip side of this, our supplier partners are already using AI to write their response documents, right? So you are kind of becoming more AI to AI discussing and proposing. So I think, you can look at it two ways. You can be a little bit nervous or you can be quite excited. I'm quite excited, but José's point around the change management piece and get people to adopt habits, because I know, like everybody else, the thing that procurement people like doing the least is research. The thing that they love doing the most is sitting down and doing a negotiation, right? So, you got to sort of mold the DNA really to thinking across that and creating the habit. So I completely agree with José on that.
Yeah, though I may be a bit long in the tooth now, Ninian, but I was always told that if you want to do a really good negotiation, you spend time doing really good research first.
I know, but the number of people I've met who don't just fly into a negotiation and say it's too much, So I remember when I first started working with Accenture and it was fact-based negotiations and all this, and the number of people, even in previous companies, who just did not do the research. So this gives people more time. It gives them an ability to do more of that research. The question is then, how do you create, commercial advantages if everybody's using the same tools? I'm not quite clear how I do that yet, but it's an interesting question.
I think we might come on to that. Some questions started to come in, but let me just sort of keep pushing on benefits for a minute. I heard you talk there, Ninian, about speed. I mean, you would think about things like savings, accuracy. I guess I'm keen to hear what you think are the big benefits that we're going to get. Speed, savings, accuracy are three. There may be others, but also, could you give people some idea of the magnitude of benefits you think we might see?
Yeah, we're in Vodafone. I've got to be a little bit careful. We're coming up to our results shortly. But let's take a hypothetical number so I can talk about it a little bit. And let's say we invested 2 million in some AI capability. We'd be looking at a return in excess of 20 to 1 in that capability in terms of additional value delivered back to the company. Some of that's around speed, but you've also got to remember at the same time, all of our supplier partners are implementing AI. Right? And some of that value, the procurement people, I'd expect them to tap into and say, hey guys, your code writing is now 50% more efficient. So therefore I can't pay a blended rate of 300 euros per day for this person. So there's efficiency within the function, but there's also significant efficiency and value being created in the supply base. And as procurement people, we'll want to tap into that as well. Yeah.
And what about accuracy? I always remember you talking to me about some of the work you did 5 years ago, might be more now, with creating the happy purchase order and how that had driven big benefits because you then had every purchase order which was correct. Is that something that AI is going to help with, or is that just getting your basic systems right?
I'm not. I think there is a tendency to say AI is going to solve everything, and AI is a technology and a capability which is great. But some of that is for us as RPA, very simplistic robotics, which we're using to improve quality. So I think it's a little bit like crypto and blockchain. Everybody jumped to it and said it will solve everything, including hunger and all this sort of stuff. And I think you've got to think about where you apply technologies for the best bang for the buck. And you might apply very simple technologies on some areas, and then you can use AI to get more value where it can be deployed best. Yeah. So it's a bit of a balance. Yeah.
So you need to get some of the basics in place first.
Yeah, I think we're in a fortunate position. We've got a single ERP system across our whole company. So we've got a single version of the truth sitting there. The data is probably still not, it's nowhere near perfect, but we are in a good position via a lot of other companies because we have the data in one place. So therefore, our starting point is good, but you've got to have some of the basics, because if you don't have your data sorted, then insights from your own data can be as good or as bad as your own data is. So I think it's certainly a basic thing you do need to get right. Yeah.
And Jose, in terms of benefits, what do you see in terms of the biggest benefits from applying AI?
So I think a lot of it means, for example, sourcing results can be expanded. So we're seeing because of the ability to process and to basically tag data points in much more precise ways, it's much easier in a post-contract environment to actually track benefits, to do things like SKU rationalization. So that's quite a
Yep.
lot of work we're doing right now, quite intensely. And if you ask why does AI help with that, basically because it accelerates the precise categorization and actually brings it 2 or 3 levels deeper to where it was, because it can also use public data to do that tagging, for example, catalogs from suppliers. So it's the point that Ninian was mentioned is like we're be shocked to know that like a high percentage of our clients doesn't have great data, great master data, all of that. And that's mostly because of the problem of entry. So the point of entry for master data is that for basically everything that sits in your systems normally is either too shallow or imprecise or wrong. And we're finding that there are some workarounds that can be done. I don't think that's something, I think that will be solved in the systems themselves in the future. But right now, reading invoice is very easy. Reading contracts, working around that is particularly powerful. And it's one of the big first quick wins we see with our clients. So getting much faster to the answer about what am I buying, how am I buying, and also where are opportunities just based on that type of porting things into databases, reading them faster, understanding patterns is it's been quite powerful and high
It
returns
feels like
And the good,
speed first, then, Jose.
for now. Yeah.
yeah, and I think over time you could use AI to improve the quality of your data. There's no question about that. It can really help you. I recall when I used to work for a company called Transco in the UK, that's a gas pipeline company, and we were looking at the spend analysis, was it? And we had this huge spend, 2.5 million, a huge spend, 2.5 million per annum on floral tributes, right? Which is like flowers for funerals and stuff like this. And I was trying to go, how did we spend this much money? And then we realized it was code AA1. So it was the first code that the requisitioner saw when they were ordering something, and they just put it in. And that's you're right. Your data gets kind of corrupted right from the start of the process. And then we're trying to figure out why we spent 2.5 million quid on flowers, right? So, and you've always got to remember, individuals in a really good way will take the easiest way to get something done. So, and that's where I came back to the UI stuff. Try and make it super easy so they do the right things. But now with AI, you can start interpreting that and saying, well, a valve for a 42-inch gas main didn't really look like a floral tribute, actually looked like a piece of engineering kit. So I think that's where AI can really help you. And then bringing in that external context, I think, is also important. Yeah.
Yeah, let's keep going on that theme. So, I think you've had some great successes in implementing certainly digital tools in Vodafone Procurement Company. What can you share in terms of the challenges you've had to overcome and how you did this? particularly in terms of implementation? And are there sort of any preconditions for success that you would say people need to think about?
Well, remember, I think this is the third wave I've been surfing now of technology change. The first wave was back e-procurement, then we had digitization and dashboards and RPA, and now we've got AI. I think the biggest single challenge is change management, because it's not a technology program. You're changing how people react and how people work with new technology. So creating a real buzz and a hunger to get some pull from people is really important. You have to do a bit of push as well. So you have to say, these are the tooling we've used. When we launched our digital dashboards on the 16th of September or 17th of September, I think it was, just over 9.5 years ago, I remember saying, this is a way of democratizing the data and allowing all of our staff to see performance and see data. And that was very well received, especially when we started putting them in sort of football league tables. So obviously the companies at the top were delighted, the companies at the bottom not so much. But we took a conscious decision that we would democratize, i.e. everybody can see every scorecard that we've got and they can place their own company where we are. So I think that's an important gate. If data is only for the few, then the many are very unhappy, right? So we democratized it. But the change management is so important. And I think probably with Jose as well, we've all got it wrong a number of times, and we've all got the scars from not getting it right. And it's still difficult because you're trying to influence human behavior, not just a bot. Yeah.
So what are you doing now differently in terms of change management that you weren't doing 10 years ago?
Yeah, I was going to say I'm telling people to use it, but I'm not. uh, we're so trying to create a buzz in the function around AI and how that can help people get through the bits of the job they don't like doing anyway. So trying to make their job easier so they can focus more on internal client interaction and relationship management. So we've really positioned it as, let's get rid of all this stuff that you don't like doing. Please give us your suggestions. And we have an electronic way of capturing the suggestions, and then we're putting those into the roadmap and then showing that they make a difference. So it's kind of 101 change management, but sometimes we just want to get stuff implemented and we don't think of the people impact. So it's really about creating that excitement with people and letting them influence the roadmap of what gets delivered and when, and then celebrating hopefully a little bit when we do deliver something that makes a difference. Yeah.
It feels like, not just as you say, creating excitement, but there's some really good communications and positive feedback going on there as well.
Yeah, and some negative feedback when we get it wrong, right? So I think on our sourcing platform, we've had 360 plus suggestions for improvement. Now, that's either because we've built a really crappy platform, or actually people are saying, I quite like this, but if you did this, it would be even better. I'm hoping it's the latter, not the former. Yeah.
Okay. Jose, anything you want to add to that in terms of the lessons learned, in terms of implementing?
We've had an interesting journey. We luckily the AI rollout was combined also with us rolling out an operating platform internally that actually tracks all the initiatives that we're running in basically a much more holistic way. And what we found interesting about AI is that it actually allows. So we have obviously a lot of internal controls, QA reviews, just the general process that you have. It actually allows to synthesize things so that reviewer and reviewed on a sourcing strategy, on our negotiation strategy, on a preparation for negotiation, sign off, etc., reviewer and reviewed, they're much more on a par now. So because you have a certain ability to synthesize. So we, for example, when we do a big event, big bid, we have these gate documents that people have, and they have certain structure, and we have AI review that against our instructions with best practice documentation, etc., and then synthesize, here are the gaps that we think you have. And we don't give them only to the person who's editing it, we also give to the person that's reviewing it. And so effectively, we're finding a bit artificial ways of increasing the demand, focusing not only on the user, but also on people that are either managing, overseeing, or then are relevant to, are relevant stakeholders to some activity, some event, some outcome.
Okay, great, thanks. We've got some really good questions coming in. So let me throw a few of those at you. And Ninian, I have to throw this one at you. So this question is, to pick up on Ninian's point, an article came out a few weeks ago suggesting that 85% of people are getting no return on investment in AI. How sure is Ninian that 20 to 1 is realistic? And what's your take on the article?
Yeah, I think there's two things. I think when you get a gold rush, right? The everybody rushes for gold. The people who make money are the ones who sell the shovels. And keep in mind, we're making our own shovels here, right? So first of all, if that was something. Secondly, I don't get to mark my own homework on the savings, so it's actually our finance department. So I know we will hit our savings target this year for AI adoption. And I think, again, to the point, don't rush into spending, 2, 3 million on a proof of concept. Do a little bit of learning first. I think those who rush in, fools rush in, take a little bit of time, reflect, and keep in mind our autonomous sourcing journey. We pitched to our chairman, said we want to do autonomous sourcing. It wasn't called AI back then or agentic AI. And that was in 2022 we pitched it. So it's taken us a while to get to where we are here today. Yeah. So uh, I think the article is probably accurate in terms of people not getting return. But we've also seen on our customer service side, we put in some agentic AI and our net promoter score went up by 30%. So the leading indicators are definitely there. So there is value. But if you just spray money around, most of it's going to fail. I think get a bit of learning and be focused. And then once you've got that, then you can decide whether you make or buy. Yeah.
So would your 20 to 1 be overall or on every single individual investment?
Oh, no, no. So because you've got a range of investments, right? I think we've got 23 use cases for AI, which are getting delivered. We've got another 100 in the pipeline. And again, this is back to the point. When I look at some of them, I think, well, can RPA not do that? Is that really AI? Or are people just bundling everything in because they know we've got a little bit of funding to do stuff? So I would say I know overall 20 to 1.
Overall. Okay, I think
Yeah.
that's an important point.
Yeah.
Another interesting question here, which I think I'm going to throw at you first, Jose, but Nini, I think you're going to want to contribute as well. So given GPT's strengths in language, but limitations in logic, math, and their tendency to hallucinate, what are the risks of applying agentic workflows in procurement? How can we put the right controls in place to ensure process resilience, managing concentration risk, and maintaining sound judgment as we automate more decision making?
Good. First thing I would say is that the GPTs are improving ridiculously. We have had specific GPTs that we have left on the shelf for 2 months because they were hallucinating too much, and literally press the button again 2 months later with the same question, and the question become much more precise. But the people have to see, particularly with GPTs, with those type of like intelligence solutions, is that 80% of the investment in AI goes to avoid and to mitigate hallucinations. So and maybe that's also the reason why some of these ROIs are not so high in other cases. It's because when when you're introducing this to your rules, to specific aspects that, help your team, you have to do a lot of testing from the get-go.
Yeah.
And so the basically hallucinations, and by the way, you then will keep having to test as you go later. What you need to learn, most important thing around AI to learn is this combination between what is prompt engineering, what is the data, and what is the outcome. That triangle is something that needs to be tweaked, in particular if you want things that are relevant to what you do. So good upfront scoping, be careful about what you release, what is shippable to use in a widespread base versus more of a test piece. And then also once it's running, you need to keep validating that it's not generating hallucinations, but 80% of the investment on specific solutions is around avoiding hallucinations.
Ninian, your perspective.
I think Jose makes a really good point. I think the level of investment and the pace of change with investment in large language models, etc., it is so high at the moment. So these tools, and which started as being kind of interesting from an academic perspective, have scaled very, very rapidly, and the investment is not dropping, which is important. I recall a little story from my father when he worked up in the bank in Stornoway, and they got a brand new photocopier, right? Brand new technology. They've never had a photocopier before up in the branch. And one of his subordinates used to check the photocopy against the original to make sure it was correct. Yeah. You think of that in today's world, we'd never even think of checking a printer or checking a photocopier, right? So, but the difference here is the pace of change, and the rapid pace of change. So I think that's one piece around the investment and the pace of change. The second piece is we still have human intervention in the procurement process. So we're not fully autonomous. And the more significant procurement processes we have, and if we have any processes that touch our customers as Vodafone, we will not let those go fully autonomous, because there's different thresholds in our company around the level of risk which we're willing to take as we experiment and learn. And some of those things with external customers, one needs to be very, very cautious indeed. So we have a clear set of rules, clear environments where we can test and we can play with things, and then very clear about how we deploy things within our framework. So that in our company is super clear.
Does that mean you don't trust it implicitly?
I trust it that absolutely the same amount as my small West Highland Terrier. He's a good friend of mine, but I know now and again he does a pee on the floor, so I need to sort of clear up after him. So I don't think trust is always a big word. Confidence is an easier word. Do you get more and more confident? Do I have 50% confidence, 60, 70, 80? Do I have 100%? Absolutely no way. Not at the moment. No, but again, the large language models are learning. And I'm pretty confident that if I do an email, it's going to get through, right? So I'm confident with that technology now, right? But I think we've all got learning still to do on AI. Yeah.
Yeah. No, very good point, Ninian. Another specific question here for Mr. Wilson. Having acknowledged that creating the habits to use AI effectively is a challenge and it is about change management, what other kind of initiatives are you leading with your teams and employees to overcome this?
That's a great question. I think learning can be not just in the workplace. So if you talk to our CTO, Scott, he presented to our senior leadership, so the top, I don't know, 150, 160 people in Vodafone over the summer, how he planned his holiday. And he did it live on stage, which was quite high risk when you think about it, yeah? And he showed how he planned his holiday without using any Google search, how he used an agent to search for he was going to Japan. Clearly, we're all in the wrong career because procurement people can't afford to do that. He went to Japan, he searched, he uploaded pictures, he asked AI to do it. So a little bit of do your own learning outside work, because with all technology, it can be a little bit scary when you're learning. And again, Malcolm, going back, and it sounds terrible, when I joined British Gas, they let me have the company laptop, and I took it home and I accidentally changed the background color to the same as the foreground color, and I couldn't see any of the text, and I was in a terrible panic about that. So I'm an early adopter with no clue sometimes when I get it wrong, but try to use it in your private life a little bit. There's lots of little pieces of AI, and just get used to learning it, I think is one of the ways. And then obviously we've got the learning. We do workshops internally. We have this is how you write a prompt workshops. This is how it searches data. This is the type of answers which you can get. This is how to refine it, and so on and so forth. And again, I think it's a little bit like Google search. Once you get really smart at it, yeah, you get more and more comfortable with the technology. So start using it at home as well as at work. Yeah.
Jose, anything to add in terms of implementation?
Just going to say one thing about AI that I think is important for everyone is, whereas it's a fantastic technology and people see it as something that's complex and technical and you name it, the reality is that what it's mostly doing is removing a ton of technical barriers. all of a sudden you're much less dependent on developers, much less dependent on data engineers, much less dependent on other things.
Yeah.
And so what's particularly interesting about that is I'm doing this with my team all the time. The personal point is a fantastic point, but also you can actually tell people focus on what you really, really know and test it on that. If you're, a good historian about, certain century of Welsh history, like try it that because what really is important for the individual from a change management standpoint is understand again this triangle of the reinforcement piece about like, okay, how can I improve it? Maybe I wrote something wrong. Maybe I specified like this trial and error, even just writing, small pieces of text on a GPT. It makes you understand how it works and what does it produce. And that sensitivity will actually then make people also more confident, right? More confident on what works and what doesn't work. Because the answer with some of these things is, well, don't give it the keys to the empire, right? Or to the, not everything can be leveraged fully in AI. You have to put human controls in it for at least for the most mission critical aspects of it.
But you're both saying that human intervention is still critically important. And actually, there's another question here which kind of builds on that, and it's as much a statement as a question. So here, let me read it out to you. So, do we believe that whilst AI adoption will be a race on both the buy and sell side, but at a point in time, it will no longer provide competitive advantage if indeed all eventually adopt it, and then it becomes all about access to the best talent because everybody's got the benefit of the AI, and therefore ultimately talent becomes the differentiator, not AI.
Talent and capability, I think, because I sit and think, I wonder how many people have got SAP Ariba in the world, right? And I wonder how many people have got data warehouses in the world. But if you think of the data and the information to run your negotiations, how you program your large language model, how you get it to learn will become a differentiator. So then that actually goes to the people, Malcolm, right? People with skills and capability. I think skills and capability will change. I think we said this before. We were talking about we hired a number of data scientists in when we were trying to digitize what we're doing. And then I don't know if they'll be called AI scientists or whatever we'll decide to call them, but I think how you program your sourcing, how your AI learns, how you teach it to learn, and the capability you develop in people, I think it's a really good point. Although the only point is many companies have exactly the same systems, but the system itself doesn't give them per se competitive advantage. It's how all the things work together around that. Yeah.
Yeah, but talent always has
Yeah.
been important. That's not going to change, is I think what I'm hearing.
I think if
I
anything,
don't. Sorry,
sorry,
Jose. Yeah.
go on, then, sorry.
I was just going to say on talent, though, Jose. I think it becomes even more important to secure talent, and I think for procurement, I genuinely mean this is one of the coolest places to be with AI because we can apply AI to a number of areas, and therefore you can actually attract in new talent. And if you can get money off your CEO to actually invest in this, you make procurement and sourcing really cool. It's a really cool place to be.
Jose?
Say that I don't see a future whereby talent is not boosted primarily by AI, to be honest. So I think it's possible that some people will be brilliant and fantastic without AI at all. But I don't see how people get deep on markets, on suppliers, on data consumption, etc., without learning how to use it as best. Now, I'll give an example. I mean, LLMs have been around for a while. In about 20 years ago, a law firm was doing some kind of litigation case, and they would basically have 20 associates and a ton of boxes in an office and just read through it overnight and try to get it in. And now it's done by one associate and one data engineer, just basically finding prompts to find the things that they do. But it still requires that associate and that data engineer to be great at finding what prompts, what type of string cases, all of that. And it will just become smarter and smarter and higher potential. But It will still need people who know how to use it, who don't make those mistakes on it, and make themselves better. So, there's a lot you can do just with like meeting preparation, presentation preparation, influence preparation with AI right now, and it's just going to get better.
So whatever you do with AI, you've still got to have the right talent, you've still got to have the right people, and it sounds like you've still got to have the right collaboration, or perhaps even more so with AI. So I guess cultures like Vodafone and Efficio become incredibly important in terms of developing the right people. Next question.
Malcolm, what did you think we did before we had spreadsheets in Excel? Right, if you
Oh,
think about it, right, we used to write it down on big
we
sheets
did.
of paper and all
We
this kind
did.
of stuff. And then we got Excel, which made things faster, quicker. And then my wife told me, well, we've got pivot tables. And I went, oh my goodness, I don't know what a pivot table is. I've given up. So if you think of it as that's a base analysis tool. So these things made us faster and quicker eventually, right? So,
Yeah.
and I see AI doing exactly the same. Yeah.
I can remember when Excel replaced, was it Lotus 123, Ninian?
Lotus 123 and WYSIWYG. What you see is
Exactly.
what you get.
Exactly
Yeah.
right. Right. So look, really, really, really key question just come in here, which to me I think is a really important one. So, how are you reconciling your investment in AI with its significant negative carbon impact, and are you achieving your sustainability goals?
This to Jose first or me?
You, Ninian, first.
Great question. Great question. I do think this is a genuine challenge, and it's a really good question. And that question, I had a webinar with our CTO internally. That exact question also came up this week or last week when I had the webinar with him. And I think two things. One, yes, are we running all of our networks and equipment on green energy and Vodafone? Yes, we are. Is this a challenge? Yes, it is. Has the world figured it out yet? No, it has not. So I think that's actually an open question, Malcolm, and is one of the key challenges to AI when you look at the consumption level of, let's call it electricity. It is huge. And in
Ridiculous.
fact, the strain that will put on, if you think electrification of cars, plus AI, is a huge strain on existing networks. And I'm not sure the world, UK, Europe, countries have really figured out how to respond to that. And I don't think companies have yet either, apart from buying green energy, right? So I think it's a huge challenge. I think that's probably one of the social impact is a huge challenge, but then the non-social stuff, if I call it that, around the ESG agenda is a very significant challenge. And I'm not sure everybody's squared that away yet, yeah, and thought it through.
Okay. Jose, anything to add to that?
No, I think just to give a bit of a number to how crazy this is, we went from 0 to 15% of our cloud cost being entirely based on AI in 6 months, right? 0 to 15%. And it's going to become 60, 70% in no time, probably doubling our costs. And so I agree with you, Ninian. In fact, we're doing a lot of work precisely on supply chain availability for transmitters and all that stuff, because basically there's a huge run for generation capacity, right? But for us, it's still, we don't have a network to run like Vodafone, so for us, it's still easy to keep that asset in check. But the scaling of it, the growth of hosting costs and other things is just nuts right now.
Great, thanks. We've got quite a number of questions about usage cases, and I want to sort of come back in maybe sort of overall broad general terms to usage cases for AI and what it's enabling. And people have been talking about, well, is it about handling data? Is it about improving process? Is it about what if scenario modeling? What do you think are the best use cases that you're seeing, you're aware of in terms of those different areas today? Jose, do you want to go first on this one?
Sure. I mean, the ability to handle RFX analytics right now is just completely transformed. It's just much, much faster. And I think that has, as we all know, that has a lot of impact on the quality of negotiations, quality of outcomes, etc. So I still think there's a big like savings boost and precision boost on the feedback you give to the market and the speed at which you do it. We all know the difference between getting feedback in an hour or in a day versus giving it in 10 days. So that's a very strong one. I think everything related, I'm going to repeat myself, but everything related to the contract lifecycle management piece, both the way to alert things, to flag, to prepare, to identify issues early, but then also redacting, redlining, negotiating, closing, all of that. It's just so inefficient. We're so bogged down with contracting, particularly if if you take it seriously, that area is like fantastically fast. I think those are two examples, and I think there are two or three more, but I'll let Ninian maybe give a few more.
So spot on with Jose. I think again the front piece of the process that Jose talked earlier about research. Research could be what I remember, just the painfulness of research, going into Google, searching, trying to understand your category better. And even with all the work you were doing, there's a finite time that you can spend on it, yeah? Because you've got to get to now I'm going to put a commercial model together, now I'm going to send out a tender document. So I think that whole research piece tremendously accelerated. We've got a cost teardown lab here in Luxembourg where we take boxes down to component level, we build up the costs again. Took us when we first started over a month to look at a piece of telecoms equipment and cost tear down, right? We were then down to a week and a half. We are probably close to hours now. Close to hours. Now it might not be 100% accurate, but if it's 85% and I get it in a day, that's a lot better than waiting a month, especially if my CEO says to me, Ninian, how many components do we have coming from Taiwan? If I can answer super quickly, it really positions procurement and supply chain differently. And I'm a great proponent of actually information and knowledge really helps position quickly. And if you can get quick, accurate answers to within a percentage back to your CEO that says, listen, we've reviewed 36,000 spare parts or parts that we have in our key products and X% touches Taiwan or China, it's quite powerful. Shows that you're kind of competent, which is kind of helpful at the end of the month when you want to get your paycheck. Yeah.
So it does feel like data handling, interrogation, but also I think what you're saying is speed first and we'll manage the accuracy. It's getting better. It's not perfect, but actually the benefits in speed are phenomenal.
Yeah, if you can reduce the tender time by 30%,
yeah,
think that 30% you can apply to someone managing relationships or doing more detailed analysis of the marketplace, right, on the next tender. And I just think the speed one is very important, especially when internal clients say procurement's too slow, takes too long, it's just an admin process, you're not adding any value, all the speeches we've had before. But now if you can go faster, then I think it's very positive.
And I think I might add to that, and it is something you said earlier on, which is yes, but don't forget the importance of the user interface.
Correct.
And putting the right focus on getting that bit right. Now, what about using AI to help with what if scenario evaluation and its predictive capability?
I'm not sure we're there yet. I can see intellectually why I would get there. And actually, we were doing some analysis on something something really complicated, which I run, which is our roaming business here as well. I run sort of the roaming. So when you travel abroad, I run that area. And actually, if you boil it down, it's a negotiation. I'll sell capacity to someone, they'll buy capacity from me. And I've said this computation is hurting my head. So I can't think through myself the different, because there's hundreds of suppliers and hundreds of options. So I've actually asked the team to build something which is what if analysis and what is the best outcome for us. So again, if we did it on spreadsheet, it'd take us months. It would literally take us months, and then it'd probably wrong at the end of it. So actually, I think it's a real opportunity. But I think we're in the foothills of that mountain, if that makes sense. So we're only beginning that journey here.
Yeah, what about Efficio's perspective on predictive capability, Jose?
I mean, what Ninian is describing is what we're seeing too, which is more data, more process. You can actually do scenarios better the traditional way. I think I'm not sure if it falls within predictive, but we are seeing a lot on cost forensics, the power of what we call anomaly detection. So we started by looking at this where you have categories that have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of data points that can give you information, but the problem is there's too many signals. So we've been able to, some purists will say traditionally that's just good data engineering, but AI obviously allows you to accelerate that modeling. We look at areas like, big areas in public cloud, for example, has so many SKUs, so many instances, and so many patterns that change. We're able to do, it's not as if we found more signals. It's actually, instead of having, 20 out of 100 false positives, we now have one or two, which means that then the analysis is much more deliberate. So it's probably doesn't fall into predictive, but I think it shows the path in a way.
I've got another question. There's loads of questions coming in. Another question just come in which builds on this, and I think I need to ask this one. Have either of you got examples of ways in which you've seen AI and predictive analytics transform supplier assessment by using real-time data to identify potential contract or performance risks before defaults occur? Ninian.
Wow, great question. The holy grail of procurement. This supplier is about to fail to deliver. Haven't seen it yet, but we are building something further up the chain, which is around using AI in our supplier qualification process. And if you talk about anomaly detection, that, sanctions, forced labor, human labor breaches. So not there yet, but again, intellectually, I get how AI could help you get to that answer. But the question will be is what information sources can you plug in to predict that supplier failure? And I was thinking of companies like Carillion in the UK when it failed. There was probably a number of public sources where flags were beginning to wave red and amber in real time that could have helped the government at the time make an earlier intervention. So intellectually, I can see it. I just think we need to think about which data sources we plugged in to give us those flags or anomalies, which we might not see otherwise. Yeah, we just might not see them.
Okay, great, thanks. One more question, because I said we're unfortunately running out of time, and I'll ask this one to you, José. Has anybody seen or aware of a standard AI-based template or model that could be directly implemented for various procurement activities? So I guess somebody's looking for something which can guide you as to what AI do you use to help improve or enable which activities.
I'm seeing specific use cases, specific tools, specific models. I haven't seen that. I don't want to finish on a down, but I do think one aspect that's important about AI is, again, going back to the same point, is that there are few models out there. The ones that are being really used, they're like few models out there. Don't worry so much about the AI part. Worry much more about the instructions you give it, the outcome you predict, basically the prompt engineering and the training data that you give it. That's where the magic is. That's how you get it cooked. Don't worry about, it's well sourced. Don't worry about how you source it. But the answer is no, to the direct question.
Okay, how about this one then? How do we protect confidentiality when using these tools?
Basically, you have to obviously align this within the rules of your IT governance, but basically you have to make sure that the data you're using and what you're generating is not used for training purposes. For heavy duty processes, things that use a lot of your data, you should be very careful about using things like, OpenAI GPT independently of the fact that it is independent, and try to understand if you can run it on localized instances. Not everything is SaaS based on your infrastructure. AWS has a lot of instances. So there are about the tools you use, the way you use them, and the type of data that you feed it that protect you a lot, right? So there's certain guarantees that are important. And of course, I think it's easier with like the mainstream providers, but some of the niche providers, follow the data, like really try to figure out how they're set up, obviously not everyone necessarily has all the checks and balances on how to do this process around AI. I'm sure Vodafone probably does, but many other companies out there don't.
Ninian, any more perspectives on confidentiality? How do we protect it?
I think, well, first of all, I think you have to protect it, right? Especially when you're dealing with customer data, maybe of 200 or 300 million customers. And again, you should remember this is a technology. We have other technologies. We've had data warehouse. We have some of our customer information anonymized, etc., and encrypted. So all those rules still apply. And I think to Jose's point, you just need to make sure you understand what information you're giving your provider, especially if it's a SaaS solution and it's going outside of your firewall. And those rules which applied before to other solutions also apply to AI. So you've got to do it within that framework, which I talked about before, which for Vodafone is very strong, and it's important we stick to it. Yeah.
Okay, great. Ninian, my last final question. I just want to come back to Vodafone Procurement Company and the many advances you've made through implementing digital tools and AI. If you had your time again, what would you now do differently when establishing your digitization AI strategy?
Wow, that's a multi-million-dollar question, literally, because we've spent multi-million dollars on our digital strategy over the years. What would I do differently? I would probably still experiment a little bit more than I've done. I think we had a vision for our autonomous sourcing 2 or 3 years ago, and we started, and then we paused a little bit, and then we've accelerated again. And I think in the meantime, we didn't experiment as much as we could have done to get some more learning for everybody. So I think having some funding, if possible, to experiment with, and then having the culture that it's okay to not be successful. Do you see that? I couldn't even say the word fail. Did you see that, Jose, in my company, right? So we had a culture that because you're a communications provider, you could never fail, right? You had to get a mobile phone signal, the fixed had to work, the broadband had to work. But getting to a culture where you can take a level of managed risk, stuff doesn't work, and you get the learning back. And I think that's probably my learning, along with when stuff wasn't working, Malcolm, I used to go, let's give it one more week. Instead of saying it's not bloody working, stop doing it, put it down to experience and start again on something else, right? And I think, that's probably a good piece of learning for me personally around, if it ain't working, stop it, take the learning, start again. Yeah.
Experiment and fail fast.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Look, thank you both very, very much indeed. It's been great talking to you both today. Thank you very much for your time and for your insights. And thank you to everyone for attending today's webinar. And once you leave the webinar, you'll be directed to a survey. We'd appreciate if you would complete that and provide your feedback. And you'll also receive a follow-up email within the next 48 hours with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. So look, everybody, thank you very much for joining us today. My special thanks to Ninian and Jose. Enjoy the rest of your hopefully technology incident-free weeks.
Yeah, super duper.
Thank you both very
Take
much
care.
indeed.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Malcolm.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Jose.
Bye.
Ciao. Bye.
Bye.